Who doesn't love to paint little cute little fuzzy little critters like these bunnies? I really enjoy painting them, and they're very quick and easy to do. So I thought I'd show you a little demonstration how easy it is to paint these little guys. And I have a demonstration sheet left over from a previous class, so I thought it would give us a little head start on doing this demonstration. You can actually use this same technique that I'm going to use for any color bunny you want to paint. You can do a gray one, brown one, a white one, you could do a spotted one. They're all kind of done the same way. And they're very quick and easy. So what I want to do is use my round Bringle blender. I'm going to take my color, in this case it's going to be my Titan Buff, or Smoked Pearl if you're using the Josonia. I'm going to stipple the paint into the brush, make sure it's well stippled in, and then I'm going to blot a little bit of it out, but not as much as if I was doing a face or something that was really well blended, because I actually want to stipple down quite a bit of paint onto this bunny to start with. We'll come in just a little closer so you can see better. And I want to think about his full parts of his body, like his hip here, and his cheek, his tummy, his back, places that are full and round. So I'm just going to start stippling here. As I get out to a place where I think I want some shading, I'm going to stipple a little more softly, or I'll continue stippling with a brush that's used up most of the paint. I'm going to just think about places that need to be shaded, and I'm either going to avoid those places or I'm going to blot my brush and use less paint on the brush. Now, from my previous demonstration, there's a leaf already painted in there, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint right over it because I'll put it back later. So you can see that what I'm creating here now is kind of a gray color. On this piece I'm painting over a very dark green, and so what you're going to get is kind of a greenish gray color that's going to show in those dark areas, and it actually shows up in the brighter areas too still, because we don't have enough layers on there to cover the background color yet. Now, in places where we have folds in the neck, then I want to create some of those folds right to start with. So I'm just going to tap on or whisk on some of this skin that's kind of bunched up where his neck folds. And I'll leave that as is. Now I'm going to go down to a smaller brush so that I can get into the smaller places. And I want to do his cheek. So I want to get this cheek nice and full here. Now we don't want his head to look like it's detached from the body, so I want to do a little bit of stippling down onto the neck, but I want to keep this cheek kind of high up here. He's got some wrinkles around his cheek, around his eye, above his cheek, so I'm just going to kind of put those in. He has a lighter area at the top of his eye that shows his brow bone right in here. And so I want to make sure I place those in there first so that I don't lose those lightest areas. And then I'm just going to continue stippling. I want to make sure he has a nice bright muzzle right here. We'll get that in. And I'm not trying to create too many shapes at this point. I'm just trying to get the places that I know I want to be light. I'm trying to create enough light in those places so that I can work with it. Down on the legs and the feet. Mainly on the legs, and again there's a leaf here, I'm just going to paint right over that leaf. Mainly on the legs we want to make sure that we get them separated. So along the edge of the forward leg I would want to make sure that I got some nice heavy paint right along the edge. And then on the leg in the background, I'll get a little bit of paint right along the edge of that leg too, but I'm not going to bring that paint all the way up to this other leg. I want to leave some shading in there. Now I'm going to go down to maybe a little bit smaller brush, if I can find one here. And I want to get into the toes, so I want to use my smallest brush to get into those little toes. I want to again get the definition for the top edge of each toe and the top edge of the foot. And there's another leaf there that I'm going to paint over. I want to get these top edges in. So for this first application, I'm just thinking mostly in terms of definition. I want to define where my lightest places are. If they're not connected just yet, that's okay. With my small brush, I'll get in here and place some of his white color into his ear. And with this small brush, I'm just kind of tapping and jabbing and dragging, because I'm not really trying to create a fuzzy look. On these particular bunnies, they're kind of fuzzy all over. They have kind of an all over fuzzy feeling. Sometimes I'll do bunnies that have more of a kind of a lumpy feeling, more tufts of fur rather than a real all over fuzzy look. And what I've discovered is that the smaller brush you use, the more texture you get in the bunny. So if I wanted this bunny to be a little more, oh, what do I want to say, like maybe his hair was a little longer and not quite so fine, then I might stipple it like this with a smaller brush, so that I would create a little more texture that way instead of an overall smoothness. But on this bunny, we're just going to go for mostly. Okay, now I'm into my second stipple, and I'm still not really going all the way out to the edge on the back of his little fanny end there, getting his tummy. And all I'm doing is I'm kind of enhancing and growing what I stippled that first time. Down to a smaller brush again. Now I want to think about a little more detail here. I'll get his foot going. He's got this big old foot back here. So a little bit of paint in there. I want to make sure that the toes are dry, and then I'm going to stipple those again. I want to increase the layers on the light areas and have fewer layers on the darker areas. So I didn't get these toes before, I'll get those toes in there. And I want to get these wrinkles again. Anything that I want to bring up lighter, I'm going to stipple kind of aggressively. And anything that I think I want to keep darker, I'll stipple more with less paint on the brush, or lighter, stipple with a lighter hand. Now I've made sure my bunny is all nice and dry to the touch, and now I'm going to load my round blending brush for a dry rub. So now I've worked that paint into the brush and I've blotted most of it out, and I'm going to come on to the bunny and rub everywhere so that every part of him has at least a little bit of paint. So all those places that you left without paint, they would now get covered with at least one thin layer, and those are going to be the darker areas, so we don't need to have such a heavy coat of paint on there. And this way you can still see the detail, and you can see what you want to bring up brighter. Okay, so then I'll start stippling again, and I want to make sure that he has a nice bright big hip here, because that's what bunnies are known for, is those big back legs. I want to make sure he's got a nice full body, so I'll start stippling there again. And I do just take these in kind of one step at a time. I don't ever try to do a whole bunch of things all at one time. I put layer on and let that dry, put another layer on, let that dry, and just do a little bit at a time so that I can maintain those lights and darks. That's what gives him his shape. I want him to have a nice big cheek. Now you'll notice on his nose, I kind of wasn't very careful to avoid the nose. I want to make that nose kind of subtle, so I'm just putting a little bit of white fur on it for now. I'll go down to a smaller brush again so that I can get into the tip of the ear. I took another look at my photograph and noticed that the tip of this ear is white, so decided I needed to get in there. Put a layer of white on the tip of that ear and get the other ear a little bit built up too. I want to make sure I've got plenty of light above his eye because that's what's going to give him an eye socket. So build that up, and yeah, we've lost his eye a little bit. I'll have to bring it back. Now any place where I feel like I don't have quite enough paint, I'll just put it in there. He needs to have a couple of toes on those feet that are in the background. I want to make sure he has plenty of fur on these toes, and if your bunny is too small to actually use one of the blenders, you can stipple a little bit with the tip of a liner brush. You can stipple and do some dry brushing to create the light at the tops of each toe, so that's what will separate one toe from another. Then we're going to dry this again before we go on. Now I've dried the bunny, and I've also mixed up my pink color to paint inside the ear and to paint on the nose because I want that to be included in the next step. So I'm working with burnt umber now and water. I'm just going to create a nice kind of a thin glaze with water and burnt umber, and I'm going to whisk this onto the bunny now to get some shading onto him. The burnt umber is an interesting color. I'm painting on a dark green background today, and so when I'm all finished with this bunny, he's going to look kind of like a tannish, brownish color, mostly white, but with all the shading colors going to be kind of brown. If I was on a blue background and using this brown over that blue, then it would take on more the look of a gray color that would be creating the shading. So it depends on what your background is, what's going to happen with these glazes. I don't really deliberately add any other shading color onto the bunnies. I mostly just depend on my background color and these washes. Now if I was painting a bunny on a light background, then I would probably do some minimal stippling to start with, and then I'd do some heavy duty washing, glazing, and then proceed from there. So we'll get this wash on, and then we want to dry him up. Now basically that really is all there is to it. After you've put the glaze on the bunny with the darker value, then you're going to go back and you're going to start stippling again. and then you would come up with something that looks more like this one, and he'd have a lot of shading in there. He'd have his light areas. You could stipple more light, however much light you wanted. If you got too much light on, you could always come back with your dry brush again. So you would load up your blender, stipple that all in, blot it out, and then you could decide where you might want some more dark, and you can just rub dark on wherever you want it. So wherever maybe you've used a little bit too much light and you've lost some of your detailing, or maybe you forgot to put some of that dark around the eye, you can just rub that all right back in. And once you get the dark in, wash your brush and go back to your light and stipple to blend. So you can go back and forth as many times as you need to do. And it really, for me, it takes about maybe 5 or 6 times of putting on the dark. I generally, if I get the shapes the way I want them to be, generally I do the overall glaze just one time. However, if you're on a really light background, then you might have to do this overall glaze more than one time. But generally I do it once. That provides all this nice dark value for me. And then from that point on, I just do the dry rubbing to put the dark where I want it. And when I am dry rubbing, I might dry rub a little bigger than what I want, but generally I won't do an overall wash. That's not to say that you couldn't, because you certainly could. Once you get your bunny to this far and you get him as fuzzy as you want him to be, my final fuzziness, I never put it on till I'm absolutely happy with the way he looks. And then I'm going to load my brush up for a stipple. And I'm not going to blot a lot of it out. I'm just going to blot a little bit of it out. And I'm going to come to the edge of him, wherever I want him to look fuzzy, and I'm going to fuzz that up. Now, a lot of times when I paint a bunny, I'll paint kind of inside the line, just slightly, just ever so little bit inside the line, so that when I get him all done, I can come back in here with my nice fuzzy brush and make sure that he looks fuzzy on his edges and not, because I don't want him to look smooth on the edges. Then you would go ahead and with your liner brush, you would create any of the little lines that define the toes. Sometimes you need more than others. It depends on how well you've managed putting your light on there. You paint the eyes, do the rest of the work on the nose, and that's it. They're just as easy as they can be. Hope you have fun painting these bunnies. You might check the website. I've got several new bunny packets out there, and if you need any help with any of the techniques, make sure you check some of my other videos that show you the terms and the techniques. Have fun with those hoppin' little bunnies.